Hi everyone, welcome back to the lecture series on British history and the history of England. Today we are with the topic Romance. Romance. The word romance originates from the French word romance. The word romance originates from the French word romance. Romance language was a language derived from Latin. Romance language was a language derived from Latin. Later it evolved to signify some works telling stories about love and chivalry. Later it evolved to signify some works telling stories about love and chivalry. Romance is a genre which deals with love or heroic adventures, both in prose or verse form. Romance is a genre which deals with love or heroic adventures, both in prose or verse forms. The plots are set in distant times and distant places, remote from everyday life. The plots of such works are set in distant times and distant places, remote from everyday life. The supernatural element is present in many medieval romances. The supernatural element is present in many medieval romances. Medieval romance appears in England in the time period from the Anglo-Saxon rule. Medieval romance appears in England in a time period from the Anglo-Saxon rule. The romances caught the popular imagination. The romances caught the popular imagination. The figures of Arthur and his knights became models. The figures of Arthur and his knights became models for works of romance. The ideas of chivalry contained in romances began to influence real life. The ideas of chivalry contained in romances began to influence real life. Romances may be classified as follows: the Matter of France, the Matter of Rome, and the Matter of Britain. Romances may be classified as follows. First, the Matter of France. The Matter of France romances related to Charlemagne and his 12 knights. The Matter of France romances related to Charlemagne and his 12 knights. The Matter of Rome romances telling about classical and mythological heroes. The Matter of Rome romances telling about classical and mythological heroes. And the third one, the Matter of Britain, are romances connected with Arthur and his knights. The Matter of Britain are romances connected with King Arthur and his knights. These stories often took the elements from prior folkloric tales and fairy stories. These stories often took the elements from prior folkloric tales and fairy stories. As time progresses, chivalric romances, which were first written in verse, changed and took on prose as the main form. As time progresses, chivalric romances, which were first written in verse, changed and took on prose as the main form. These stories were filled with adventure and traditional roles of hero and villain. These stories were filled with adventure and traditional roles of hero and villain. The most famous stories from this genre feature the court of King Arthur and characters like Lancelot, Galahad, etc. The most famous stories from this genre feature the court of King Arthur and characters like Lancelot and Galahad. The earliest stories dealt mostly with folkloric themes, but these faded over time in favor of other thematic subjects. The earliest stories dealt mostly with folkloric themes, but these faded over time in favor of other thematic subjects. Knights, mystical and magical women such as fairy ladies and wizards were often featured. Knights, mystical and magical women such as fairy ladies and wizards were often featured. Characters like Morgan Le Fay, the Enchantress from Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, is a great example. Characters like Morgan Le Fay, the Enchantress from Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, is a great example. So these are the main points from the topic romance. In the next class, we will meet again with some other topics.